This is my 2018 Kia Stinger GT2, but it won't be mine for long. I am selling my Stinger on Cars and Bids, which is my new enthusiast car auction website for modern cool cars. But before I sell it, I wanted to make this video to sum up a year of ownership with my Stinger, go over the pros and cons after about 8,000 miles. Now, it might surprise you to hear that I'm already selling this car. After all, I announced it in June, so I've only had it for about 5 months, but that isn't really true. I actually bought this car to replace my Mercedes AMG wagon back in January because I knew I would be selling the AMG wagon on Cars and Bids when it launched. But then COVID happened, so we delayed the launch of Cars and Bids, which meant I delayed the announcement of the Stinger. So actually, I've had this car for almost exactly a year, and I've put about 8,300 miles on it. And today I'm going to tell you my thoughts on my Stinger. I drive this car a lot. It is my second most driven car after my Mercedes G500 Cabriolet. And I drive the Stinger all over Southern California to film videos. Sometimes 3 hours one way I film and 3 hours right back home, and then I do it all again the next day. So I've spent a lot of time in the Stinger getting to know it pretty well. And today I'm going to tell you what I think of it. I'm going to give you the pros, the cons, everything I've loved and didn't love about Kia Stinger ownership over the last year. So let's get started. All right, I'm going to start the pros and cons and my experience with the Stinger by telling you about some of the things I liked the best about owning this car for the last year. The number one thing I liked the very most about this car was unquestionably the driving experience. This actually surprised me. I thought it'd be pretty good. I had driven it before for a video, but it was really good. This car is tremendously responsive with its engine. Turbo V6, I think about 350 horsepower, somewhere in there. I don't remember the exact number, but it is excellent. Really quick, feels great. The moment you press the accelerator, you're off. Smooth power delivery. It's just excellent acceleration, and this is a quick car. Even though by modern standards a lot of cars are fast, think about it relative to an Icon, this is faster than an E39 BMW M5. It really is fast. It feels fast, great power delivery, excellent. But it wasn't just the acceleration that I liked. The handling is really even more fantastic than that. I'm surprised by how balanced this car is, how dynamic it is, how quickly it steers. Tremendous precision in the steering rack, very quick steering, and how well it handles with very little body roll, pushes through corners well. I cannot say enough great things about the driving experience with this car. I really was not expecting that from a Kia, but that is exactly what I got. When I bought this car, value and practicality and styling were kind of my top things I figured I'd like about it. They were all surpassed throughout my year of ownership by driving experience, which is probably what I'll miss the most. Really excellent, especially for the price point. And next up, number two thing I liked the most about my Stinger ownership experience, undoubtedly the styling of this car. This is a really beautiful, really attractive car. Kia did a fantastic job with it. For its first entry into the sports sedan world, they needed something that drove well, was fast, and looked good, and that is exactly what they came up with. And this is a really nice looking car. Throughout the entire year I owned it, I was always happy with how it looked, and people even who were questioning, why would you get a Kia? What are you thinking? Always conceded, hey, at least it looks good. And it certainly does do that. It is a beautiful, attractive, very well proportioned car. Kia did that well. With that said, two little complaints I have about the styling. One is the wheels. I never really warmed up to this wheel design. I think they're kind of too excessive. 5-spoke wheels would have looked nice, but then they're split at the end and it just doesn't look that good to me. But the real drawback is in the middle where you have this fake center lock wheel design, which just looks stupid. This car already has too many fake vents on the hood, on the front fenders, and then adding the fake center lock just pushes it over the top for fussiness. I wish the wheels looked better. I also have never liked this piece. This little reflector on the side could have stopped about here or maybe here, but instead it runs down the entire side of the fender and it just looks weird. Now, if you get the car in red, as I do, I always get my cars in the original press color, the one in all the advertisements, the red actually hides this to the point where you don't even really notice it anymore, so that hasn't been a drawback in my opinion. But if you get a non-red one, you'll see this a lot, and I think it looks kind of stupid. Not really a complaint with red, but something to mention. But those are minor gripes relative to the overall general look of this car. I really think beautiful, attractive, very well done with only a few little issues that I've mentioned. A gorgeous car. Frankly, I wish more cars looked like this one. And finally, the last thing I really loved about this car during my ownership was practicality. For one thing, it has all-wheel drive. Now, basically every new sports sedan in this segment offers or comes standard with all-wheel drive, so it's not really that surprising. And I didn't exactly use it during my ownership of this car here in San Diego. In fact, I didn't even know this car was equipped with all-wheel drive until it was delivered to me, and it was a nice little surprise. But it does have it, and maybe if I sell it to someone in a northern climate, that can be a benefit, because otherwise it's rear-wheel drive, which isn't the best for the snow. But practicality goes beyond that. This is a hatchback, not a sedan with a trunk, and you can see the cargo area is quite large, and I fill it with all sorts of things, including a stuffed whale, apparently. I've never really been into sedans. In fact, every single daily driver car I have ever owned has been a hatchback, except for my first two. So it's been only hatchbacks, wagons, and SUVs since my second car. I just really prefer the practicality of a hatchback, and this car offers that. It's like a trunk, but bigger, more practical, and I was able to put a lot in this car. You can see I loaded basically a forest into the back of it when I was buying plants for my house, and it took it all, handled it no problem. This is a very practical car, and I really liked that throughout my ownership. Same deal in the back seat. This is a large enough car to have a practical, usable back seat, so you could put rear passengers in it, even adults. They were comfortable, no problem. It is a very well-proportioned car in terms of sizing, big cargo area, big back seat, but that stuff doesn't impede the design of the car still looking good, or the handling, the driving experience still drives well, even though it's large and practical. It's a really good packaging, this car. But there are some drawbacks to this car too, some pretty pronounced ones, and they mostly come in here. The first one you notice when you use this car for a while is the technology. Now, I reviewed this car, I think like 2-3 years ago when it first came out, and I mentioned the technology was fantastic, it was great, and it was back then. But now, this is a 2018 model, it isn't anymore. Tech has moved fast, and it has left this car behind quickly. Some examples. For one thing, the infotainment screen is just small. Compared to basically every other car, it is small, and it's not very responsive. You press something, you're gonna be waiting for a second. When this car first came out, it was a fairly responsive infotainment system as these things went, but now infotainment is like smartphone, and you just expect to tap and immediately it responds. This car doesn't really do that. Also, I've never been impressed with the camera system in this car. You put it into reverse, this is the backup camera, does not look that good, and that's the only angle you get. For a sticker price of over $50,000, that terrible resolution is all there is. Now, I've been told that Kia upgraded the camera and added a top-down camera for the 2019 model year, but for 18, this is what you were stuck with. The other big technology drawback comes in the gauge cluster, where you have an old-school analog gauge cluster system, which isn't really that big a deal, except that newer Kia models have this cool turn signal thing where you put on the turn signal and then a camera appears in the gauge cluster that shows your blind spot on whichever side you're turning. That's an amazing feature, and it should be on one of the top range Kia models, the Stinger, but it isn't. I'm told they're finally adding it for a facelift to this car for the 21 or 22 model year, but it just feels pretty late considering it's on lesser Kias right now, and it's kind of a shame. I've also never been entirely satisfied with the information that's displayed on the screen that does exist in the gauge cluster, this little screen here. It doesn't tell you what music you're listening to, which is very annoying, because then you have to have the music up on the infotainment screen if you want to see the song that's playing, and that means that if you want the map also on the infotainment screen, you're going to be going back and forth or whatever because it's such a small screen. It's a mistake. The music should always be available in the gauge cluster like it is in so many other cars, and that's a weird miss from Kia. It's disappointing. So there are some tech issues with this car, and the other big problem that I have with it is materials quality. It's kind of a mixed thing in here. You do have some really nice materials like this dashboard, and then the aluminum buttons and climate control, vent surrounds, that stuff all looks good, but there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't. For instance, you open up the door and you can see the door sill doesn't say Stinger, doesn't say Kia. In fact, it doesn't say anything. It's just a generic door sill. It's not lit up like a lot of European luxury brands. It's not really all that nice. You go into the floor mat and again, it's just black and it says Stinger in black. There's no like embroidered different colors, stitching, metal. A lot of nicer cars have that kind of thing. And you can see some cost cutting elsewhere too. The climate control buttons are all relatively cheap plastic. The steering wheel center, the steering wheel buttons, the turn signal and cruise control stalks. It's just not the highest quality materials in here. Kia was able to offer this car with basically BMW performance, more practicality, better acceleration, but a lower price. And if you're wondering how they do that, it's little cost-cutting things you might not notice on the test drive, but after a year, after spending time in other BMWs, you start to see, oh, my car doesn't look as nice in this area, in that area, and that's where they pull out some of the money and make it cheaper. But the biggest drawback to this car, at least according to my friends, is the Kia badge. Now, I hang out with a wide variety of car enthusiasts. Some SUV off-road people, Subaru people, German, European car, Golf R, Audi, 80s, 90s cars, all different types of car enthusiasts I try to be friends with, and they all had one thing in common. They laugh at Kia. They just don't think Kia is a legitimate auto brand, even though they've made this excellent, fast, rear-wheel drive performance sedan. Everybody's willing to concede, oh, this seems like a nice car, but that doesn't stop them from making fun of you for driving a Kia. Now, I have a lot of other cars too. My Ford GT, my old Defender, my G-Wagon Cabriolet, all that I have fun with. So I don't really care that much about being made fun of for my daily use car that I really only drive for work purposes. It doesn't matter to me at all. But if you're buying this car as your only vehicle for $30, $40, almost $50,000, and you see BMW and Audi as other possibilities, and then you see a Kia badge, it might cause a problem. A lot of people don't want to admit it, but they are badge conscious. They want their friends to see them driving an Audi, a Lexus, something nice. And even as nice as this car is and as well as it drives, and I think it might outdrive BMW, at least the last 3 Series, at the end of the day, it says Kia on the front. And I think that's a big problem for a lot of people who are considering this car. You show up at work, your friends, at the bank, doesn't matter, with a BMW, and you think, oh, I've got something, I'm successful. You show up with this, and you have to explain, yeah, but it drives better than a BMW, it looks better, and see, this guy on YouTube has one, and it's a cool car. It's just a lot of buts and explanations. When you're driving a higher end brand, you don't have to do that. And like it or not, I think that is a real reality that's faced with Kia in general, but especially with Kia at this price point. They've made a lot of inroads into mainstream cars, the Telluride and the K5, their sedan, but $50,000+, Kia has a lot of trouble because then you're butting up against some real rivals. And even if they don't offer better cars, the brand name is often enough to counteract that. And I think that's one of the reasons the Stinger really hasn't sold all that well. So those are the pros and cons of my ownership experience with the Stinger over the last year. But there are still 4 more things I want to discuss about this car as it relates to my year with a Kia Stinger. One is the fuel economy. I have it right here. Over the last 7,300 miles, I guess I reset it 1,000 miles in, I got 22.8 miles per gallon. That's actually not all that great, but I drive, let's just say, a little more spirited than a lot of other people with one of these. The car is always in sport mode, without exception. I've driven it in comfort mode maybe 4 total miles. And I drive pretty fast. I'm on the highway a lot, going, I really want to get places relatively quickly. The point is, I've heard people get 24, 25 miles per gallon, no problem. Either way, it was a huge improvement over my E63 AMG wagon, which wasn't really faster, which had a big V8. So I was happy to get similar performance with about a 20% gain in fuel economy. Not so bad. Next up, reliability. Like I said, a little over 8,000 miles in this car. Not really a great test of reliability, especially for a new car, but I haven't had any problems. No issues, as expected in that low of mileage. There has been one little weird issue. Every so often I'll be driving along or I'll get in the car and the sound has moved from like the center to be just on the rear speaker. So I have to go in and adjust it, move it back into the center or up to the front, and I'll be driving along again a few days later and I'll just hear, oh, the sound has moved to the back again. I haven't done anything, I haven't changed anything. It seems to happen about every week or so, but that's really the only problem I've had. Nothing major, no real issues at all. all. Next up, I want to talk about my experience with the Kia dealership, because ultimately that's one of the issues that Kia is up against with this car. You buy from BMW, Audi, they know how to handle a customer at this price point. Does Kia? And I have to say, I've never actually been to the Kia dealership. So when I bought this car, the sticker price was $52,000. They were asking $37,000 for it because it had been sitting in the lot for 2 years. And I called them, the dealer where I bought it, North County Kia in Escondido, is quite far from my house. And I called them and I said, look, if you bring the car to me, I will pay your $37,000 asking price. And they said, done. And so they brought me the car and I signed the paperwork, you know, on my dining room table, and that was it. And so I never went to the dealer. Now, a couple weeks later, here's a great story. A couple weeks later, I'm sitting at home, whatever, I get a call, and it's the Kia dealer, and they say, hey, you know, Mr. DeMuro, we'd like to have you bring in the Stinger and take care of those items that we owe you. And I'm like, what items? What are you talking about? And they said, oh, you know, like we said when we sold you the car, that extra key that we still owe you, and then the trim pieces. And I'm thinking, well, I don't remember this, but okay. And so I thought about it, and I thought, you know, actually, I don't remember getting a second key with the car. I only had one, so maybe they must have lost it, and I do owe me another key. And then the trim pieces over time on the roof, some of the black trim pieces had started to kind of fade and wear and crack, which I'm told is an issue that a lot of these Stingers have had. And so the dealer was going to replace it. You know, it's a new car. They felt that that was the right thing to do. Apparently they thought we had agreed to these things when I signed the deal. We definitely didn't. I checked back and I hadn't signed any papers saying they would do those things. And frankly, I wouldn't have even noticed or really cared all that much. But apparently they had in their system that they did owe them. And so the second key, and they were going to fix it. So I said, look, happy to have you do it, but you're really far away. Can you come pick up the car? And they said, yeah, you know, okay. I said, look, I'll pay you whatever. They said, yeah, okay. No, we'll come get it. We'll come get it. It was very nice of them. They came down, got the car. It was gone for like a week while they had the trim pieces. They had to paint them, you know, whatever. They brought it back. Trim pieces all good. Then they give me the second key. And so I'm like, great, now I have a second key. Like I should have. Trim pieces look good. Looks like a new car. I'm glad they did that for me. Very nice of them. I take the second key and I go to put it in my spare key drawer, open it up, and there's the already existing second key. So I did have a second key. They actually gave me a third key, and I didn't even ask for it. They just thought they hadn't given me a second key. I also thought they hadn't given me a second key, but they did. So now I have 3 keys to my Kia Stinger. But good service, you know, on my end. They didn't really pursue like, oh, you're Doug DeMuro, we have to do better for you or whatever. They weren't really that aware of the situation. I think they just wanted to sell the car. I wanted to buy the car and it worked out. But I haven't really had any experience with the dealer aside from them giving me an extra key without me asking for it. Finally, last thing I want to talk about, and that is, would I buy this car again? That's the big question when you're selling a car. Would you get it again? And the answer is yes, absolutely, but for the right price. At $52,000, the original sticker price of this car, I think it's overpriced. Given the quality of the materials and the badge, it's just too much money. I do think it drives better than a 3 Series, at least the 3 Series that was new when this car came out. It is a wonderful car. It drives really well, but it's just not nice enough, and the Kia badge is just not good enough to justify, even with Kia's long warranty. I bought this car. It had been sitting on the dealer lot for 2 years. I bought it for about $37,000. At that money, it starts to become more reasonable, but to me it's still a little bit expensive, and I wouldn't pay that for a used one. Mine was technically new. No one had owned it before, but they had punched the warranty already to get credit for a sale. But I am technically the first owner. But $37,000, to me, that was about where it started to become reasonable. Soon, these will start to be in the 20s, and at that point, they might already be there. And at that point, it starts to become really appealing. Given the performance, the handling, the driving experience, given the long warranty, Kia's warranty shortens for the second owner, but it's still active on every Stinger. Then it starts to become, yeah, okay, maybe that really starts to make some sense. I can get past the badge and the materials issues in the 20s for this car just because of how fast it is and how well it drives. And I think these are getting into seriously good deal territory, especially given the driving experience. So I definitely wouldn't pay anything close to sticker for one of these, but it is a great car. I do recommend it. I would get it again. You'll just have to get over the fact that the quality, the tech isn't quite up to where I think it should be, and the Kia badge, which ultimately is probably this car's biggest hurdle preventing people from buying it. And so that's my Kia Stinger. I've been surprised by this car. I've liked it more than I thought, and it has some great benefits. It drives tremendously well. I think it looks great, and it's reasonably practical, and it can be yours on Cars and Bids. Now, I'm excited to replace it with the new Defender. I've been looking forward to that for a long time, but I will miss the Stinger a lot more than I thought I would when I first bought it. And it's just a shame Kia hasn't had more success with this car. I figured I would make this video to sum up my ownership of the Stinger after a year and about 8,000 miles. I don't know why I did that. Every so often when I go to get in the car, I turn it on, the speakers will have moved themselves to the... The speakers have moved. They're in the, where'd they go?